Hello! Welcome to the shop, and today I'm going to be making both Witcher swords. Let's get to it! So I just finished printing the swords here, and I have to say they turned out very nice. The white parts are printed out in PLA plastic, and the gray ones are printed out in resin. I'm especially happy with how the resin prints turned out, and the details are incredible, and it will really pop. I made it to where both swords have wooden dowels running through the inside of them. That way, in case if I do end up dropping them or having to fend off toilet paper hoarders, they have a higher chance of being a lot more stable and not end up just falling into a million pieces. Now, after putting the parts together like a set of dysfunctional Legos, I make sure that they are all lined up before finally applying the glue, and yeah, I'm just gonna let this scene speak for itself. And after doing the exact same thing to the other sword, I heat up the soldering iron and meld the separate parts together. Now this serves a couple different purposes. It is so much easier to melt plastic together than to sand it down flush. I couldn't tell you the amount of times I wish I have thought of this before finally discovering that this is actually a thing. It also makes it to where you can Bondo over the seams and ultimately making it to where the finished product looks like it's one complete piece. After melding all the separate parts, I use a product called XTC3D to try to get rid of as many layer lines as possible, making sure to measure it out carefully. In the printing community, I've seen so many people write this product off, saying that it doesn't work or doesn't achieve the results they want. What I tend to realize is that they didn't mix out the right ratio or used it in the completely wrong way. XTC3D is used as an intermediate step, so it saves you hours upon hours of sanding. Now don't get me wrong, you still have to sand till your hands are stubs, but the sheer amount of time you save with this product is well worth its weight in gold. After setting aside the XTC3D swords to dry, I started working on the embellishments on the sword. Now I printed these out in resin because I wanted the ridiculous details that only a resin printer can capture. They're also really easy to sand and have virtually no visible layer lines. After sanding, I fill in any details that need to be filled in with Bondo, I let the Bondo dry, and then sand it off afterwards. Then I apply some sanding primer, let that dry, and sand it down smooth. This allows me to see any other imperfections that I missed to fill in with Bondo and repeat that process again. Now I want the jewels of the sword to be a different color, but I don't really want to paint them because I kind of think that looks a little tacky. I actually want them to be the actual color and a little bit transparent. So I go ahead and make the mold of the gems on the brooch so I can cast them out of a different material. After about 6 hours of the mold to dry, I then took it apart only to find that the mold didn't quite come out the way I wanted it to. I have a couple different theories on why it didn't come out completely smooth, but nonetheless, the main gem parts were all perfect and completely usable. Sometime in the future though, I will most likely redo the mold for the gems because I did just learn a great method on improving the transparent look of them. So I go ahead and cast the gems out of a 2-part clear resin. Now this resin has a full cure time of 24 hours because A, I don't have a pressure chamber or a vacuum chamber to get the bubbles out of a clear resin that cures in 1/8 of the time, and B, this was recommended to me for the specific reason of me not owning a vacuum chamber.
Magic conch shell? Will I ever get
A vacuum chamber?
Maybe someday.
Now that the XTC3D swords are dry, I go ahead and Bondo over any seams that desperately need it, which in some cases amount to the entire prop, which I then get to sand. Which brings me to the bane of every prop maker's existence: sanding. There is a ton of sanding involved in every project I do. Sometimes I think it would be easier if I just had hands made out of sandpaper and a face mask that was permanently attached to my face. It's unavoidable, and when you're a prop maker, it will be inevitable. But instead of focusing on the most laborious and repetitive task mankind can give us, let us rejoice and give an ode to sanding, because in the end, the results will speak for themselves. Alright, so after copious amounts of sanding, I'm going to start my first bit of painting. I ended up painting the pommel of the sword gloss black, so whatever metallic color I apply to it will really pop. I go ahead and use some multichrome paint refills with an airbrush to achieve the chromiest chrome money can buy, because whoo-wee, that stuff is not cheap. One of my favorite spray paints of all time is Montana Gold spray paint, which I then proceed to apply to the brooch and the rear guard of the sword. I also used a high gloss black for the undercoat of this part as well. After letting the pommel dry, I proceed to spray another coat of Multichrome on it to finish it off with one of the silveriest silvers money can buy. And after about a day or so of drying, I then proceed to clear coat the pommel with what is, to my knowledge, the only clear coat to not knacker the shine of chrome or silver paint. I then prep the silver sword with the same high gloss black and then proceed to do the exact same thing to the entirety of the silver sword, making this sword's cost the world's most expensive fake silver Witcher sword. Probably. And after talking to myself about how good the shine looks, which is just way too awkward to show footage of and way easier just to voice over it, I then apply the white paint to cover the handle, which to my surprise turned out a lot better than I thought it actually would. After painting the handle, I move on to arguably my favorite part of this entire process, which is the weathering. Now, I absolutely love weathering props. It gives you full creative control on what kind of story you want to tell, where the prop has been, what it has been through, and so on and so forth. With this prop, the sword is really only ever used to kill monsters, so I want it to look like it's been pierced through the stomach of a monster, so the main colors I chose to weather with are red, brown, and black. Frankly, you can do whatever you want though. You can tell whatever story you want to tell. Want to use purple because in a crossover universe, Geralt slays My Little Pony? Go for it. The possibilities are truly endless. After finishing up the weathering, I switch over to finish the main sword. I use rub and buff for the blade, and after applying it all over, I then use my airbrush with metallic black to make sure that the middle of the blade is prominent and free of any silver. I believe Henry Cavill actually said the sword is made out of meteorite, so the metallic black works out quite nicely. So I ended up pulling the gems out of the mold off camera, but as you can see, they turn out quite nicely. I go ahead, sand them, and apply a layer of clear coat on them, and after the clear coat dries, I then proceed to glue them into the brooch of the sword. Afterwards, I attach the rear guard and the brooch to the sword with some hot glue, and then I use brown leather paint to paint the vinyl leather saying skin-like pattern. It took me weeks to find the closest match to the handle, and in the end, I couldn't find it in brown, so I had to improvise with some leather paint, and it all worked out in the end. I finally did the thing that I have been waiting to do since the beginning of this build, which is to finally weather the chrome pommel, and my god, did this turn out fantastic. After cutting the vinyl strips, I adhered one last coat of brown on the handle to blend everything in. With one last pass of black weathering for the handle, I insert pommel, glue it into place, and that's basically it. I just got done with both of the Witcher swords. It was about a month-long project between all the other orders and all the other requests that I had. I am so unbelievably happy about how these turned out. I used a lot of new painting techniques that I didn't know before. All the weathering, all the time that it took really paid off. And although they're not absolutely perfect, I think both swords tell a story, and that's really all that matters. I am really, really happy about how the main Witcher sword turned out. It has such a phenomenally good weight to it, and the details are just absolutely turned out miraculously. But yes, thank you so much for watching the video. I already have my next project lined up. It's also going to be in the Witcher theme. And thank you for watching.